negócio aqui que eu acho que tem. Aqui tem um comentário aqui abusivo. Esse daqui eu vou estar ocultando. A gata charmosa, comentário. Gente, isso aqui é doação, tá, gente? As pessoas doam de coração, tá bom? Ninguém tá forçando ninguém a doar nada não, tá bom? Isso aqui é um trabalho. Então as pessoas que estão doando aí estão doando de coração, tá bom? Anápolis, Goiás, Camaçari, Bahia, um forte abraço. Forte abraço. Isso, os conterrâneos. Estamos aqui com o pessoal, todo mundo cansado, mas ninguém. Você vê, meia-noite está todo mundo aqui, muito forte. Volta Redonda, Rio de Janeiro. Eu fui para Bahia de São Paulo, passei por Volta Redonda. Um abraço. Brumado, Bahia, mais um baiano aí. Mari Santos, uma moça. Muito obrigado, Mari, pelo seu comentário. Um abraço. José Carlos Santos, Brasil, 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 tamo junto, um abraço. Vamos lá, gente. Sempre tem eles, né? Não tem jeito, né? Estamos aqui ao vivo. É isso aí, pessoal. Vamos de São Paulo. É isso, meu amigo. Vocês estão saindo. Em nome do Brasil. Vamos que vamos. Brás, Maringá, um abraço, querido. São Paulo 22, Paraná, Brasil, um abraço. Paraná tá forte movimento, hein, gente? Fiquei sabendo aí. Os caminhoneiros estão em peso também em Paraná. Opa, tem um comentário aqui de onde é. Fora o Pinóquio, um abraço, gente. Deus abençoe. Mais um comentário de algum lugar aqui. Santa Cruz do Capibaribe, Pernambuco. Única cidade em Pernambuco que Bolsonaro ganhou. Um abraço. Paulo Barreto, um abraço. Gente, nossa luta a gente já sabe o porquê né? Então a gente não precisa discutir isso na live, tá bom? Guaratinguetá, mais uma vez estamos juntos. Deus abençoe todos vocês. São Paulo, um abraço, Lucinalva. Gente, lembra que passa muito rápido, são muitos comentários. Lucinalva Lima, e eu volto naqueles maiores comentários, tá bom? É isso aí, um abraço. Os comunistas estão em peso na live, vou começar a se iniciar porque é chato isso. Chato. Minas Gerais com o capitão David Dias Pereira, um abraço, meu querido, obrigado pelo seu comentário. Minas Gerais com o capitão David Dias Pereira, um abraço. Deus, pátria e família. Deixa eu voltar aqui novamente. Joselito Lisboa dos Santos, Deus, pátria e família. A Bahia está com vocês nessa luta e oração. Muito obrigado, Rose. Deus abençoe, querida. Paraná, Brasil conosco. Carlos, Daniel, um abraço. Muita gente aí, pessoal, na live. Estamos com 900 pessoas assistindo. Olha só, mais uma pessoa de Cuiabá aqui, ó. Um abraço. Qual que é o nome dela aqui? Cris Formiga. Um abraço, Cris. Eu acho que eu já te vi nas lives, hein? Um abraço, tá acompanhando a gente aí. Cris Formiga. Guarulhos SP. Um abraço. Santa Catarina conosco. Tá bom, pessoal? Estamos encerrando a live. Daqui a mais alguns minutinhos, pessoal. Faltando 7 minutos. Opa, Jiquié, Bahia. Wanda, é venda exata, Jiquié, Bahia. Um abraço, querido. O agro é top. É isso aí, um abraço. Nordeste em peso na live. Deus proteja o Brasil. Vou mostrar aqui pra vocês, pessoal, as barracas, tá bom? Novamente. Serra Gaúcha conosco. São Paulo, capital. Márcio. Opa, deixa eu ver quem é esse Márcio aqui. Márcio Martins. Um abraço, Márcio. E estamos os patriotas aqui conosco, aqui acompanhando. Em tempo real a live, tá bom? Vendo os comentários de vocês. E é isso aí, pessoal. Ali nós temos as barracas, barraca de água, barraca de refeições, tá bom? Tá todo mundo aqui. Nós temos a minha digníssima esposa aqui que tá se escondendo, ela é boliviana, pessoal. A minha esposa tá aqui. Ela não quer aparecer, pessoal. Ela é boliviana, ela sabe que lá no país dela tá daquele jeito. Recebe notícias sempre da mãe dela, mas já falei pra ela me passar essas notícias aí pra gente passar pra vocês. Só sei que tá tendo manifestação. A mãe dela lá na Bolívia hoje foi pras manifestações, só pra vocês terem uma ideia, tá? Tô esperando as novidades aí da mãe dela, tá? Porque o Brasil tá sendo exemplo, tá, gente? Pra quem não sabe aí, o Brasil tá servindo de exemplo aí pra outros países que são dominados pelo comunismo, tá? cristãos saindo para as ruas, então vamos fazer o nosso trabalho. São Paulo, tamo junto, patriotas. Você é filho do pastor? Não, não sou filho de Deus. Meu pai não é pastor. Meu pai, na verdade, meu pai era espírita, tá? Mas eu acho que Deus, ele é acima de tudo, tá? Respeito todas as religiões, pessoal. Sou do xamanismo, inclusive, tá? Quem conhece o xamanismo aí, deixa um like pra mim aí, arru, tá bom? Servimos a Deus acima de tudo, né? Vila Velha, Espírito Santo, um abraço, Bolsonaro. Então é basicamente isso. A gente força, fé, continue assim. Desde já agradeço pela força primavera brasileira. Deve ser Primavera do Leste, um abraço. Belém do Pará, Bolsonaro, reeleito, também acho. Será que vai ter uma nova eleição? Então, pessoal, como eu estava falando para vocês, a minha religião, eu costumo dizer que é Deus, na verdade. Eu posso dizer que sou crente, tá? Mas eu não sou evangélico, tá bom? Mas admiro todas as religiões, respeito, tá bom? A Umbanda, o Candomblé, respeito todas, não tenho nada contra cada um. Mas eu sou adepto ao xamanismo, tá bom? Muito amor no coração. Natal, Rio Grande do Norte, um abraço. Goiânia, Goiás, Bolsonaro aqui, é isso, de verdade. Mas estou apoiando aí o nosso Brasil, porque o Brasil, ele precisa de nós, tá? Tá ganhando um dinheirinho aí. Cara, eu trabalho, eu sou empresário, né? Vida de pastor. Eu sou empresário, então graças a Deus eu ganho sim meu dinheirinho, tá? Tô aqui numa live independente, tá? Não tô sendo patrocinado por ninguém me pagou, assim como o PT paga, né? Algumas coisas aí, ninguém me pagou, não recebi nenhuma propina para fazer essas lives, tá? Estou recebendo doações que me ajudam, tá bom? Essas doações me ajudam, então é tranquilo, tá? Aqui não precisa nem esconder celular não, que graças a Deus ninguém rouba ninguém aqui. Gente, muito obrigado. Vamos encerrar a live em alguns minutos, faltam 4 minutos para estar encerrando a live. Que Deus abençoe a todos vocês. Quem puder fazer mais alguma doação aí, agradeço, tá bom? Vamos encerrar. É só clicar aí no chat, tá efetuando a sua doação a partir de R$2, pode estar efetuando aí, tá bom? Quem quiser efetuar através do Pix, 619-8254-6510, será agradecido na próxima. Os petistas são audiência, bem verdade. Na próxima live eu agradeço a todos que fizeram doação via Pix, tá bom? 619-8254-6510, tá bom? Ailton Ferreira da Silva, Tito no bem. Agradeço a todos, muitas doações aí através do Pix. Vamos estar falando na próxima live, tá? Que Deus abençoe a todos, que Deus multiplique todas as doações. Que você que não deu seu like ainda, não esqueça, vai aí, clica em cima aí, vamos bater 6.300 likes, falta só 7 likes. Vai aí, clica no botão do joinha, você que é petista também, que tá na live, dá o seu joinha agora. Você tá aí conosco aí na live, tá mandando Lula, vai lá, clica lá, dá um joinha pra nós, ajuda a live aí, tá bom? Que Deus abençoe você, que Deus multiplique, que o amor entre em todos os corações nessa noite, tá bom? Que estão conosco aí. E amanhã nós teremos uma grande resposta. Amanhã eu vou fazer a cobertura aqui, pessoal, cedo, tá? Amanhã eu começo 2 da tarde aqui, a cobertura oficial aqui amanhã, e vou continuar transmitindo dessa forma. Fizemos uma parceria com uma empresa, tá bom? Que fez a transmissão para nós, mas não deu muito certo, então amanhã nós iremos transmitir novamente ao vivo. Que Deus abençoe ricamente a vida de cada um de vocês. 2 minutos para encerrar a live, tá bom? Anagé, Bahia, um abraço, querido. Manda alô sim, com certeza. Um alô pra você, vamos lá. Eduardo Feitosa, um alô, querido. Um abração pra você, querido. Deus abençoe sua vida. Lindsay Mears, um abraço. John Norton está aí desde o começo da live, botando Lula, subindo o tempo todo. Muito obrigado, cara, pela sua presença, tá bom? Que Deus abençoe. Corey Zacor, muito obrigado também, tá bom? Eita, meu Deus. Fernanda Cunha, não vou falar sua mensagem, Fernanda. Meu Deus do céu. Eu não sei se é fake não, mas esse povo pega pesado mesmo, viu? Que Deus abençoe vocês. Obrigado, petistas, pela vossa audiência. Luan Vinícius, muito obrigado, Luan. Verdade, os petistas tudo na live aqui. Tudo na live aqui. Muito obrigado pela audiência de vocês. Que Deus abençoe cada um de vocês. Luan Vinícius, um abração pra você, cara. Gostei das suas palavras. Parabéns, guerreiros. Vamos encerrar, pessoal. Faltando 1 minuto pra encerrar. Vamos lá, mais alguém quer deixar algum comentário, gente? Que Deus abençoe todos vocês. A audiência é ótima, né, amigo? Sim, graças a Deus. Mas nós tivemos 3 mil pessoas simultaneamente. Ontem tivemos 80 mil pessoas aqui nas ruas e tivemos mais de 3 mil pessoas simultaneamente. Bateu 130 mil visualizações no nosso vídeo de ontem ou anteontem, não me recordo. Ana Paula, ótima live. Muito obrigado, Ana Paula Pereira Rodrigues. É por isso que nós estamos aqui, por vocês, que deixam o apoio de vocês. Cristiana Lindeua, um grande abraço, querido. Manda um bom dia para São João Gonçalo do Rio de Janeiro. São Gonçalo, Rio de Janeiro. Gente, pessoal de São Gonçalo, eu morei aí em Cabo Frio. Um grande abraço para vocês, tá bom? Que Deus abençoe vocês grandemente, tá bom? É isso aí, pessoal, encerrando a live. Meia-noite, que Deus abençoe. São Paulo, capital. Márcio, morei em cidade de Tiradentes aí, Márcio. Vamos falar um pouquinho aqui, gente. Vou encerrar, tá encerrado, acabou a live, podem sair, tá bom? Vou continuar falando com algumas pessoas aqui. Tá encerrada a live, minha cidade, vamos lá. Cuiabá, minha cidade, um abraço, faz de conta, pode sair, gente, pode sair. Vou conversar com pessoas que estão conversando comigo. Rio de Janeiro, vamos lá. Andréia Pires, tamo junto, deixa o like de vocês, tá, pessoal? Encerramos a live meia-noite, vou falar mais um pouquinho aqui. Use a bandeira do Brasil junto ao nome do ladrão. Bom, não entendi muito o seu comentário, mas que Deus abençoe. Pode sair, pessoal, que Deus abençoe vocês. Eu não quero desligar aqui a live e encerrar com 700 pessoas assistindo, então podem ir desligando aí, tá bom? Encerrando, que Deus abençoe grandemente a vida de cada um de vocês, tá bom? Muito obrigado e até amanhã. Amanhã tamo junto novamente. Deixa eu mandar um abraço falando com vocês, né, pessoal? Que Deus abençoe vocês, tá bom? Até o próximo vídeo. Amanhã estamos novamente ao vivo, transmitindo daqui, tá? De Cuiabá, Mato Grosso, tá bom? Muito obrigado a todos vocês que estão inscritos no canal, a vocês que deixaram o seu like, a vocês que contribuíram com o meu trabalho. Deixa eu dar uma limpadinha no celular, pessoal. Eu tô aqui falando, mas eu consigo ter uma imagem melhor, tá bom? Isso aí, que Deus abençoe, que Deus multiplique todas as doações que nós conseguimos hoje alcançar, tá bom? 1000 vezes aí na vida de vocês, tá bom? E vamos embora, encerrando a live agora aqui ao vivo para todo o Brasil, mano. Macapá, um abraço, até mais. Meu Deus do céu. Gente, tem comentário aqui, Elza Penida, eu não sei se eu encerro. Vamos embora, gente, vamos embora, vamos descer. Vai indo aqui que eu vou conversando com o meu povo aqui. Meu Deus do céu, gente, vocês são malucos da cabeça, né? Vocês estão com cada comentário aqui. Gente, muito obrigado pela audiência, tá bom? Batemos aí 6.488 likes, bastante doação. Que Deus abençoe. Estamos encerrando aqui, indo embora, tá bom? Quem foi inscrito no canal, acompanha os outros vídeos aí, tem bastante vídeo de drone, vídeo... Deixa eu virar minha... Ó, a bandeirinha aqui, ó, Corinthians. Acompanha os vídeos aí, pessoal, que eu fiz aí, tá bom? Tem mais vídeos, tá bom? Vídeos a respeito daqui também, tá? Deixa eu virar meu bonezinho, eu gosto de ficar com meu boné virado mesmo, tá? E é isso aí, pessoal, mais um trabalho aí, graças a Deus, tudo certinho, não tivemos nenhum problema, tá bom? Mais uma manifestação pacífica e agora estou me recolhendo para minha casa. Os brasileiros ainda estão aqui, os patriotas, bastante patriota aqui, ó. Ao vivo para todo o Brasil. Os patriotas que ficam, permanecem aqui, tem barraca de acampamento, bastante coisa. Então é isso aí, pessoal, vamos encerrando a live com mais de 700 pessoas ainda ao vivo. Eu tô até com dó de desligar aqui, gente, mas temos que encerrar, beleza? Meia-noite. Deus abençoe, até a próxima. Amanhã tamo junto novamente. Fica ligado que vai sair mais vídeo. É isso, patriotinha, dá tchau pro povo. Ao vivo para todo o Brasil. Nosso luto caiu. Retornamos novamente.
Vou só ligar meu áudio. Escutando? Tá me escutando? Tá? Tá me escutando legal agora, não tá?
Voz de velho?
Tá uma voz ruim?
Voz
Tá
de
distorcida? Alô, alô, tá escutando? Tá escutando bem, Bia?
Não, você tá parecendo.
Não,
Que voz de velho?
Ao vivo.
Seja um palho de luz exorado sobre a larga amplidão deste céu, este canto rebelde o passado, bem remidos pastor de Israel. Seja o hino de glória que vale, de esperança de um novo porvir, com visões de triunfo em vale, mesmo ele lutando surgir. Liberdade, liberdade, abre as asas sobre nós, das lutas à tempestade, das cruzamos tua voz. Liberdade, liberdade, abre as asas sobre nós. Vemos que escravos outrora tenha vindo em tão nobre país.
A filosofia e a ciência da natureza. Como então, cara, sendo uma pura verdade. A nossa cultura, ela está sendo perdida, cara. Literalmente perdida. Literalmente perdida. A verdadeira cultura, não é, mas muito da nossa cultura está entre aquele senhor, né, mora numa cidadezinha pequena, mora lá na fazenda, que ninguém dá nenhum valor para ele nem nada, mas os filósofos também, muitos cientistas, pessoas estudadas, dedicaram a vida dele toda. Quando se fazia uma pergunta pro Enéas até hoje, doutor Enéas, qual é o sentido da vida? O cara trazia, né, um esclarecimento, cara, um esclarecimento. E nunca colocando um ponto de vista dele. Ele falava, olha, falando mais do que ele estudou, do que ele estudou e viveu também na prática, né? Foi comprovado. Então aí você tem gosto de ouvir umas pessoas dessas. Tem gosto de ouvir uma pessoa dessa. Teve outro aí, né, cara, agora não sei o nome dele, de vez em quando eu vejo no YouTube, já era um senhor. Ao mesmo tempo que ele falava sobre a cultura do Brasil, ele era bem dinâmico, você sorria, né, nas palestras dele. Então é isso aí, cara. Também tô nessa, cara, só falta 9 likes. Não, mas não vira não, pô. Os brasileiros são fortes, pô. Os brasileiros são fortes. E que o brasileiro ele sempre vence, mano. Às vezes procrastina, mas quando leva um choque de realidade, assim como levamos esse choque de realidade, vai ter bom pra gente se despertar. Não por causa de um partido, mas despertar por causa de um futuro. De um futuro. Talvez não de um futuro breve, mas médio e longo prazo.
Seja o nosso país triunfante.
Mandar gosto de essas pessoas que se dedicaram à vida, né, ao estudo, se dedicaram de coração, né, aqueles que estudou uma meia dúzia de matéria e quer debater com alguém que sabe um pouco menos do que ele para se sentir melhor. A linguagem do Enéas era, cara, quanto mais eu estudo, eu entendo que eu não sou melhor do que ninguém. Posso ter um pouco mais de informação, sim, porque tive acesso, né, de uma forma mais fácil que muitas outras pessoas, mas eu sou tão importante quanto. Aí ele falou, quanto a faxineira, quanto essas pessoas. Aí eu achava bacana, cara. Sempre teve medo do Enéas, eu também tinha, pô, era meninão na época, cara barbudo, a gente, né? Denilson, valeu Denilson Mateus, deixou o like e fortaleceu o canal, obrigado irmão. Galera, chegou, bateu os 800 likes, vamos dar grito de liberdade. Doutor Enéas, João Batista, Figueiredo, agora nosso capitão. Deu kkkk. Se Deus quiser, vamos vencer. Intervenção militar, SOS, Forças Armadas. Nós temos até o fim do ano para tirar. Não, mano, a gente tem um fim do ano, tem o ano que começa, né? A mudança começa pela gente. Eu vou encerrar essa live contando uma historinha que acontece no sul, não sei qual é, né? Que eu vou aproveitar e vou ali no toalete, que tá bem ali. É o momento de terminar a historinha. Galera, uma empresa do sul, ele tem um lema assim: o erro não pode passar de mim. É uma empresa, né, como se fosse aquelas empresas, né, que essa galera de usina trabalha aí e tal, fazendo peça. Aí o erro não pode passar de mim. Ou seja, eu tenho 4 pessoas trabalhando em uma peça. Eu faço uma parte, o outro faz outra, o outro faz outra. E eu sou responsável só pela minha parte. O segundo é responsável pela parte dele e pela minha. O terceiro é responsável pela parte dele, pelo do segundo e pelo terceiro. O quarto é responsável pela parte dele, pela parte do terceiro, né, pela parte do segundo e pela parte do primeiro. Então, o erro não pode passar de mim. Se passasse, eu ia ser chamado a atenção. Então era um salvando o outro, né? E o quarto não poderia passar dele, porque senão todo mundo ia perder nessa situação. Então era um olhando pelo outro. Então galera, o erro não pode passar da gente. Se eu quero mudar o Brasil, eu sei que eu também tenho essa mesma vontade de muitos de vocês, né, a curto prazo, essa mudança. Mas mano, não vamos pensar a curto prazo, né? Não vamos pensar. Porque quando você pensa a longo prazo, se acontecer uma coisa boa a curto prazo, pô, mano, é lucro. Você não estava esperando e aconteceu. Porque a longo prazo é certo acontecer, tá? É que nem trabalhar com investimento. A longo prazo é certo que se você fizer o que precisa ser feito, você vai ficar rico. A curto prazo pode acontecer, mas a chance de você ficar pobre de maré é maior. Então vamos pensar, o erro não pode passar de mim. Então o meu trabalho aqui é esse, o erro não pode passar de mim. Sim. O senhor diz a respeito da gente, diz respeito a elas mesmo. Às vezes quando me zoam, me xingam, é um sentimento delas. Tá? E elas querem que eu sinta a mesma coisa. Então tenho que viver o meu, né? Acreditar no meu e não deixar que interferências externas que não sejam que é positiva, para agregar, venha me atrapalhar. Galera, agora eu encerro pedindo vocês, já contei a historinha ali que eu queria contar, eu acho que foi relevante. A partir da próxima live, pô, não discuta com a galera, né, que tá pra provocar, não. Assim, deixa eles, se a gente discutir, não, eles vão continuar aqui na live. Então, assim, vamos nos fortalecer, coisas positivas, deixa eles aí, né? Vamos deixar eles atrapalhar, não. Vê que eu até parei de ler as mensagens deles aí. Quando aparece aí, até internamente eu fico até rindo. Eu falo, poxa, cara, doido pra atingir a gente, pra ver a gente putinho. Porque a alegria deles é ver a gente putinho, chateado, gritando. E a gente sabe que tá indo muito bem aqui. E amanhã eles vão assistir minha live, mano. Graças a Deus por isso. Eles vão assistir, eles vão ver uma multidão aqui. Eu espero que eles assistam de outros patriotas também, de outros estados aí. Aquele abraço aí para todo mundo, até a última que chegou gritando aí, o Bolsonaro eleito. Não, moço, ninguém tá falando aqui de ninguém eleito, não. Tá, outra aí falando que queria cidadania cubana, né? Mas assim, boa noite, bom descanso, valeu, Érica. Aquele abraço, boa noite pra vocês também. Um abraço aí, ó. O Denilson mandou aquele abraço, valeu. Que o trabalho desses grandes youtubers se espalhe no mundo afora, isso. Valeu, Fernando, que chegue mesmo. Você me chamou de Daniela, será que... Daniela... eu acho que eu chamei a Eric de Érica, tá? Então tá... Então valeu, tá pago. Tá pago. Tá pago a minha manga. Boa noite, Daniel. Que Deus te proteja. Amém. Talvez amanhã, né, eu cubro aqui, né? Porque senão eu não consigo pagar meus compromissos. Eu vou cobrir aqui na parte de dia, tardezinha, né? Quando diminuir a multidão da galera, vou ligar o aplicativo, vou fazer umas corridas, né? Quando cansar eu venho dormir aqui, que eu vou estar dormindo aqui. Então, se quiser acompanhar as lives de Uber, depois que eu terminar a live aqui, automaticamente já emendo no Uber com a live ligada. Quem tiver aí vai ver como que eu trabalho. Galera, agora é verdade, verdadeira, aquele beijão, tá? Aquele beijão pra vocês. Se quiser acompanhar as lives de Uber, depois que eu terminar a live aqui, automaticamente já emendo no Uber com a live ligada. Quem tiver aí vai ver como que eu trabalho.
controle, será que as pilhas Duracell aguentam a energia desta família?
Democrats win the House?
I think it's going to be tough, but I think we can. I think we'll win the Senate, and I think the House is tougher.
The House is tougher. Our power rankings suggest Republicans are likely to win 23 seats, easily taking control if that's correct. And there are some bellwethers to look out for.
There are a few early signs we'll get in election night. Virginia's the big one. The 3 House races, there are 2 that are in pretty solidly Biden turf in Northern Virginia.
And the marquee races will be for the evenly split Senate, with what appear to be exceedingly close contests in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. In Ohio, former President Trump made a final stop to help boost Republican Senate candidate J.D. Vance, but ended up making his own headlines.
I'm going to be making a very big announcement on Tuesday, November 15th at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida.
But these last-minute get-out-the-vote efforts only go so far. Some 44 million people have already voted, with registered Democrats holding an advantage. In Washington, I'm Doug Luzader for Good Day.
Midterms roll on. Polls are closed across the continental U.S. In Alaska voting at this hour. In Hawaii, the vote is conducted entirely by mail. Let's get to some of our boards here. The Pennsylvania Senate race, too early to call, but we are saying that John Fetterman, the Democrat, is leading at this hour. And in Georgia, it is too close to call.
Arizona Senate race, it is still too early to call. Mark Kelly trying to defend his seat from Blake Masters. Also, Wisconsin Senate, we're going to characterize that one also too close to call at this hour.
We got interrupted our conversation with Maryland's new governor-elect, Wes Moore, the first black governor from Maryland, I might add, so making his
Well, I think we were able to draw a very clear contrast with our opponent where we knew that going into this race that no matter who the opponent was, we were going to focus on the issues that Marylanders were concerned about. That we knew that we were going to focus on making sure that people can and should feel safe in their own communities, and we can have a 21st century education system. And while despite the fact that my opponent, where I define patriotism is when I was in the military and I left my family to lead paratroopers overseas in Afghanistan, his definition of patriotism was putting on a baseball cap and asking people to join him as he went to the Capitol on January 6th. We knew that being able to help Marylanders understand that was going to be important, but we also made sure that our messaging was focused on not asking people to support us because they were afraid of something, but it was asking people to support us because they could believe in something, and that's why I think we had such an overwhelming win.
And Governor-elect, a lot of Democrats kept President Biden at arm's length. You embraced him. He was campaigning for you just the other day. We have our polling shows that a lot of Democrats don't want the current president to run again. Why did you embrace the president, and why did it work for others?
Yeah, well, I'm thankful that the president, came to Maryland, both because it's important that as a state that we are going to have a strong relationship with Washington. We've got big things that we are going to get done in the state of Maryland, and we're going to need the support from Washington in order to do it. But also importantly, I think the president recognizes that there's something special happening here in Maryland. that if you think about the fact that Maryland is proving to be bold and is going to move fast about how we're thinking about everything about renewable energy and clean energy, to being able to offer a service year option for every single high school graduate. Maryland is prepared to move and go fast. And I'm excited for the fact that the president came here and recognizes the fact that this is going to be Maryland's decade. It's exciting for us.
All right, Governor-elect Wes Moore, congratulations on your victory tonight. I should mention in the primary, Wes Moore ran against some household names, at least in politics. He had a very crowded primary. Tom Perez, the former DNC chairman, was one of his opponents. So he prevailed in the primary and then went on to a race that was a bit easier for him because he was, again, it was another of those Trump-backed candidates who proved to be too controversial for the voters of Maryland.
He's never run before. He has run a major charity. He's a military veteran. He was raised by a single mom. Saw his father die in front of him when he was 3 years old. He is such an American story, an all-American story, and it's going to be fascinating to watch what he does in Maryland.
All right, well, we are continuing to watch the midterm elections. At stake, who controls Congress? Just 5 seats needed by the Republicans to take control of the House. Just 1 net gain in the Senate will give them the Senate. We are waiting to see how this plays out. Will we know tonight or will it be a few days? We're going to pause just for a moment here and let some of our other stations who've been in their local news join us. So we'll pause just a moment and rejoin with you on the other side. Welcome back. NBC's coverage of the 2022 midterm elections rolls on. As we started the night, Lester, the question was, would there be a big red wave? Would there be a ripple? Would there be a tsunami? Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator of South Carolina, said tonight he thinks the Senate will go to the Republicans. He believes the House will as well, but he said we are not seeing a wave that some polls had predicted.
We appear to be seeing a breakdown of the country as it stood before this election and reflected in the numbers we're watching. Let's go to Peter Alexander in all-important Pennsylvania at the Oz campaign headquarters in Newtown, Pennsylvania. Peter?
Lester, behind me, you can see that the Republican Senate candidate, Dr. Mehmet Oz, is now out on the stage with his family. He says there are a lot of votes to be counted, and he's not wrong right now. They are still in this process, and they anticipate, according to the acting Secretary of State, that they may be going through this counting process for the next few days. But the bottom line is there's certainly some bad signs, some ominous signs for the Oz campaign at this point. Consider John Fetterman's effort. Right now, Fetterman is outperforming Joe Biden from the 2020 election in some key areas, including Scranton, Joe Biden's hometown. Oz is doubling his performance there right now. The advantage was about 8 points 2 years ago. This time around, it is roughly 16 points. And then Allegheny County, that's in Pittsburgh. John Fetterman there tonight with a 33-point advantage so far compared to 20-point advantage that Joe Biden had just a couple of years ago. Dr. Oz has really cast himself as a moderate throughout this campaign, but I think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny of the fact that he hosted Donald Trump this past weekend in some of these key counties that folks are watching. And the counties that we're watching right now are those collar counties that border the suburbs of Philly, that border Philadelphia right now. A lot of votes still to be counted there. And speaking to some of the Republicans in those counties tonight, they said to me, it's the economy stupid, trying to co-opt the message that they had heard from Bill Clinton, frankly, back in the early 1990s. But tonight, it's clear that the abortion issue is significant as well. Even some conservatives saying to me that was on their mind as they prepared to vote tonight. We'll be keeping a close eye on the way things go over the course of this evening. But Oz is not giving up. He may need to wait several more days before he knows which way this one goes. Back to you guys.
Peter, thanks. And there are the current numbers on the board as we have them.
Okay, Gabe Gutierrez is in Atlanta following that close race. He is at the Warnock campaign headquarters. Hi, Gabe.
Hi, Savannah. Well, we expected a long night in Georgia, and here we are, a real squeaker. And right now, both candidates under that 50% threshold as we await more votes to roll in. It was a short time ago. John Ossoff, the other senator from Georgia, was here trying to pump up the crowd, trying to convince them to stick around. We still have not heard from Senator Raphael Warnock so far, but Warnock's supporters are hoping that these last batches of votes, a lot of votes actually from in and around Atlanta, might put him over the top. Over on the other side, Walker supporters hope that the vote count from more rural areas might have him come out on top tonight. But again, Savannah and Lester, that big question, whoever comes out on top tonight, will they cross that 50% threshold and prevent the runoff? If no candidate gets there, we'll be back here in a few weeks, a month from now, in what is a crucial race here in Georgia. Back to you.
A lot of people say they've seen that movie before, Gabe. Thanks very much. We want to welcome NBC News contributor Stephen Hayes, who's editor and CEO of the online opinion and news publication The Dispatch, as well as NBC News political analyst and Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson. Eugene, let me begin with you. This is not a night turning out as many Republicans had thought, and frankly, many Democrats had thought. What is your viewpoint on where we are and how we got there?
Well, this is kind of an election. It's like a menu in a diner. You know, there are a million items on the menu, and you can sort of choose what you want. You can believe what you want about this election. Democrats can believe they've had a really, really good night. I mean, the Republicans need one lousy seat in the Senate, 5 lousy seats in the House, and they have the majorities. And here it is, you know, coming up on midnight, and we still can't say decisively that they've won a majority in either house of Congress. So that's an amazing performance for a party in the first term of that party's presidency. In a midterm, it just doesn't happen. So the Democrats can feel they've defended their turf pretty well. Republicans at the same time are making inroads. Look at what happened in Florida. I think we've really seen the emergence of Ron DeSantis as an even more major figure in the Republican Party and a real sort of formidable opponent to Donald Trump if he decides to run for president. I mean, look at he's who galvanized Florida and also did the gerrymander that is giving them more House seats in Florida.
Steve, are we seeing an election where it's really more about party loyalty coming back home as opposed to what we've heard in a lot of this, you know, the exit polling about the economy and these other factors?
Well, yeah, I think it has a lot to do with party loyalty. The exit polling seems to indicate that people really cared about those issues. But the parties are very starkly split on those issues that people care about. And so it'll be interesting. We won't know for a few days when we really get to look at the data. I think we're going to see some voters did, in fact, split their ballots and vote for Brian Kemp and Raphael Warnock.
Yeah,
and by the way, though, let me mention one other quick thing, though. It is astounding, Lester, that we're talking about a Senate race in the state of Georgia between two black men, a black Republican and a black incumbent Democrat, and that is really an astounding thing, given the Georgia of my youth when I grew up next door in South Carolina.
Yeah, I want to get Stephen Hayes to weigh in on all that. Stephen.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what Eugene has said there. I mean, this was basically a one-state wave, right? It was Florida, and then nothing else. And I think if you're Republicans right now, you have to be looking at these results, and there's a lot to learn still, and have this sense that there are missed opportunities here. I mean, we weren't really talking about competitive races in the Massachusetts governor's race, for instance, the Maryland governor's race. You just interviewed Wes Moore. You know, Maryland had a historically popular Republican governor in Larry Hogan, who had campaigned for another candidate in the primaries, and instead, backed by Donald Trump, Dan Cox ran this sort of extremist campaign, a January 6th sympathetic person. That's a missed opportunity, and I think you start to look down the line. J.D. Vance wins his race in Ohio, which has become a red state, but requires a cash infusion from national Republicans of some $35 to $40 million to get the job done. And then you look at places like Arizona, like Pennsylvania, that perhaps better candidates would have mattered. Mitch McConnell raised this a few weeks ago in a not-so-veiled shot at Donald Trump, I think. And I think Mitch McConnell looks pretty vindicated on the candidate quality question.
Well, we'll get into it more. Stephen Hayes, Eugene Robinson, thanks for your time tonight. We've got a lot more to cover. NBC Special Election Night coverage, Decision 2022, rolls on when we come back.
Black November na loja do mecânico, a maior loja de máquinas e ferramentas do Brasil. Caixa de ferramentas sanfonada com 40 peças, R$ 429,90. Kit de parafusadeira de impacto e parafusadeira furadeira, R$ 499,90. 2 lojas em Franca e 2 em Ribeirão Preto. Compre também pelo site ou pelo app.
É cartão virtual?
É cartão virtual Bradesco, mas é mais conhecido pela...
Mr. Secretary, when is this going to get better? You came into this job saying you were going to fight crime. Have you been successful? Found a way to put that. Can you update us on the status of negotiations? Welcome back. As the results come in, we're able to make some characterizations. Let's look at the Maine governor's race right now. And Janet Mills, the incumbent, in a rematch against Paul LePage, a Republican. Janet Mills, the projected winner as governor of Maine. And here's where we are with the closely watched governor's race in Arizona. Still too early to call.
Let's go to the Wisconsin governor race. The incumbent, Tony Evers, trying to hang on against his challenger. Too close to call there. And in Michigan, it is too early to call. Gretchen Whitmer seeking another term as governor. Let's go to Chuck. We haven't talked about Wisconsin in a little while.
We haven't, but I do want to get you to Georgia here for a second because I want to show you we may have a recount in order to see if somebody gets to 50%, and that somebody's more likely to be Warnock than it is Walker, even though Walker is leading right now. Let me show you. As you see, where's the remaining vote? We have a neat little tool here with the circles. Most of the remaining vote is in the Atlanta suburbs, as you can see here. So our models do indicate this. Warnock basically has a shot at 50% plus one. But it may be so close at the end of the night that there actually might have to be a recount to decide whether we have a runoff.
Wait,
okay,
is it like a legal recount or automatic?
Well, if it's, that's something, I'm going to have to go to my book. That's why we have an election book. All right, you stumped me on this one.
Our best people are working on it.
We'll get that. We'll get our best people on it. The Wisconsin Senate race, as you can see here, this has been tight, but Johnson has got a slight lead. I just want to show you, we've been keeping track of our split ticket states here. I want to show you the governor's race here. As you can see, Evers is leading. He's at 50.5. As you can see here, he's overperforming, it looks like by about 1.5 points. So there's clearly we wondered if it would, could we see Evers win and Johnson with both incumbents? That would be of interest. And I got to take you to one other point that we haven't made. We were doing our quick what if. The Republicans are running out of Senate seats. Let me show you what I mean, right? We already know New Hampshire is over here. We already know, New Hampshire.
Over there. Yeah.
This is what I get for being a little too quick. I can go with the live here, if you will, I believe. There we go. So we already have put, we got to put New Hampshire back over here, since we know that was called. So Arizona, Kelly's leading, all right? Pennsylvania, Fetterman's leading. These are just the leads. Wisconsin, Johnson's leading. You see where I'm going here? If the Republicans don't pick off Nevada or Georgia here, they're just running out of ways to get to 51 seats themselves. Could we have a situation if Democrats hold Nevada, pick off Pennsylvania, even if Georgia's in a runoff, it may not be for Senate control. Democrats might already have it. There's a chance right now Democrats could pick up a Senate seat. Just something to think about for the night.
And just to follow up, apparently Georgia law, a candidate can request a recount of the margin.
I promise you, Lester, to avoid a runoff and avoid Thanksgiving campaigns, the Democratic Party will probably pay for that recount. Or if it's the Walker on there, the Republican Party will pay for that recount.
Okay. Recount to runoff. Right. The hits just keep on coming.
It's to avoid, I mean, their voter fatigue, too, is a real thing. I mean, I heard about that on the campaign trail. I talked to one voter who said, I really hope there's not a runoff, only so I don't have to keep seeing the ads, right? In one of the most expensive Senate races in the country.
No question about it. Let's go to Garrett Haake. He's NBC senior Capitol Hill correspondent. He's at House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy's headquarters. Of course, Kevin McCarthy hoping that he will be the incoming speaker if Republicans take the House tonight. What are you hearing there, Garrett?
Well, Savannah, Republicans were planning for a victory party tonight, and as you can see behind me, there's not much of a party happening here. Now, they may still be on the path to taking the House, but it hasn't happened yet, and it hasn't happened easily. The wave that so many Republican lawmakers and strategists that I've been talking to over the last couple of weeks have predicted would show up hasn't. And at the beginning of the night, I talked about two bellwether races to watch for how big that race might be. Rhode Island 2, where Republicans thought they had a chance to send a Republican to Congress from that state for the first time in 30 years. NBC News projects the Democrat will win that race. And then the Virginia 7th District, which we've already talked about so much tonight. Abigail Spanberger holding on and winning in that race as well. I heard from a number of Democratic lawmakers after that race was called. They felt a real boost of energy, a little wind in their sails that Abigail Spanberger won one of the most expensive and hardest fought matchups of this cycle. Now, there's still a ton of seats in play that Republicans feel good about, open seats that have been leaning their direction. It's a long night to go, but this is turning into a much more of a slog than Republicans expected on the way to the House majority.
All right, Garrett Haake, we'll see how it develops. We're back with more coverage right after this.
The day's biggest political stories with trusted insight and expert analysis. A daily look at the politics behind the headlines. Meet the Press Now, streaming weekdays at 4 p.m. on NBC News Now.
Let's go back to the board, see what we've got. Minnesota's governor's race too early to call, but the Democrat Tim Walz, the incumbent, leading at this hour.
All right, Ned Lamont is the projected winner in Connecticut in the governor's race.
All right, let's go to Kristen Welker. She's at the White House, and we know President Biden's been on the phone tweeting about calling victorious candidates tonight, and perhaps Kristen making more calls than he thought he would be making tonight.
I think that's absolutely right, Savannah. By my count, so far, he's made more than 20 calls. And the word of the hour here at the White House is that the president and the advisors around him are feeling buoyed by these results so far. There you see tweeting out a picture of him making some of these calls. Why is he feeling buoyed? Well, because of some of these results. Senator Maggie Hassan among the lawmakers whom he called. Democrats were watching this race really closely, very nervous about what could happen here. The fact that Maggie Hassan holds on to her Senate seat is significant. The president about to call New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Remember what we saw in the waning days of this race, Savannah and Lester. You saw this all hands on deck approach to campaigning for Governor Hochul. The first lady was there. The president was there. The vice president was there to keep her in that deep blue state. And so the president's made a number of other calls. Let me read off a couple more for you. The other big race they were watching, Abigail Spanberger, of course, that was a win. That was a big one. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, no surprise there that he would reach out to Chuck Schumer, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Representative Jennifer Wexton, and the list goes on and on. But it gives you a sense of the mood here behind the scenes at the White House. They say they are just not seeing this red wave that they were fearing. And as Chuck has said, now what do we expect moving forward? Look, the president moved from his residence into the dining room outside of the Oval Office to make these phone calls. And so that is where he is reaching out to these winners as he continues to watch the returns come in. And then we continue to hear from advisors close to the president that we can expect to hear from him in some form, in some fashion tomorrow, responding to everything that is occurring tonight. Savannah and Lester.
All right, Chuck is at the big board. What do you want to show us?
Well, look, we're on the verge, and I actually I thought we were going to have something.
We have a few seconds, so just give us a teaser, Chuck.
Exactly. There's a reason we told you the early indicators. I said Indiana 1 was one of the early indicators. We still aren't able to count Indiana 1, which tells you part of the reason is because we still don't know which way the House is going. And in fact, with Indiana 1 did tell us, we didn't know it was going to tell us that, Savannah.
Well, we are in suspense with bated breath. It's coming up on 9 o'clock on the West Coast, midnight here in the East, but we're still going full speed ahead. Lots of results to come in. Results unknown. We'll be back after this.
And good evening. It is still election night in America. I'm Tom Yamas, picking up our special coverage of Decision 2022. Right now, we are watching the balance of power in the House, where Republicans went into the night needing a net gain of just 5 seats to gain control. But the red wave they were hoping for may turn into more of a red ripple. It's still very early in the night. A lot of West Coast races still out there. Some of the most interesting races that could serve as a bellwether playing out in Virginia. Let's take a look right now. NBC News projects incumbent Democrat Jennifer Wexton, the winner in Virginia's 10th district. In Virginia's 7th district, a very tight race, but incumbent Democrat Abigail Spanberger, the projected winner there. Had either Wexton or Spanberger lost, it would have signaled a big night for Republicans. Possibly, we try to study patterns here, but sometimes you can be surprised. I want to bring in senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Hake. Garrett, this is playing out not exactly as Republicans expected. We should tell voters where you are and viewers. You're at the sort of Republican headquarters watch party, if you will, for House Republicans. It doesn't really look like a party. What's happening there?
No, Tom, no party to speak of here. This was Kevin McCarthy's victory event. It was supposed to be a launching pad for him to be the next Speaker of the House. As you pointed out, Republicans may still get there, but the red wave that strategists and lawmakers had been anticipating for weeks has not materialized. You walk through some of those key races in Virginia. It looks like Republicans may pick up that Virginia 2nd District, Elaine Luria's race, but the other two, which were kind of high water marks for potentially how high a wave could go in the state of Virginia are off the table for them. And that's been the case in races all around the country. In Rhode Island, a race that they had targeted. In Kansas, a race that Republicans had targeted, not going their way. And so, again, this is turning into a seat-by-seat slog that could go all through the night. And by the way, will make governing, if the Republicans take the majority with only a narrow, small, single-digit, perhaps, seat margin, as Nancy Pelosi can tell them, much more difficult to govern the House with only that kind of cushion, Tom.
Garrett, as far as the East Coast is concerned, or the eastern part of the United States is concerned, what are the Republicans thinking went wrong with the president's approval rating so low, with the economy, inflation so high in the minds of voters? What's gone wrong in the eastern part of the United States?
Well, so far, I think the Republicans would say they've mostly lost on blue turf. The races that they were hoping that they could pick up in Virginia or in Connecticut or Rhode Island have been states that are, typically Democratic. They've done very well in Florida tonight. They are still in the mix in North Carolina, and they're still in the mix for several seats in New York State. And Tom, I think New York State could be telling here. But so, the map is so big for Republicans. They've got so many places to find those 5 seats that they need. I don't know that they can say it's gone wrong, but it hasn't gone as well as they thought it could. The Democrats have gotten used to governing with a very small majority, and I think Republicans could find themselves in a very similar situation when all these votes are eventually counted.
Yeah, Garrett, because Republicans had so many plans on what they were going to do and so many things they were going to change in the House. They almost campaigned on these kind of things. It's interesting to see what will happen if their majority is not that strong, what they can actually accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, look, especially if they don't also take the Senate, I think you're looking at a series of messaging bills being the kinds of things that House Republicans can pass, and a heavy focus on investigations and oversight. Tom?
All right, Garrett Haig, first, Garrett, we appreciate it. We're going to keep a close eye on the many key races that are yet to be decided. We want to pause now to rejoin NBC's special coverage Decision 2022. I'm Tom Yamas.
Welcome back. It is the midnight hour. Lester Hold'em, we are here on an exciting election night. Midnight on the East Coast, 9 o'clock out west.
Yeah, there have been some surprises tonight. The polls have just closed in Alaska, and aside from Hawaii, which votes entirely by mail, all the votes have been cast, and now it is down to the counting.
It's all over but the counting may take a while. Let's go to Hawaii. Too early to call this Senate race. Brian Schatz looking for another term in the United States Senate. Georgia's Senate race all night long, just too close to call. And in Pennsylvania, we're saying it's too early to call, but we project Fetterman, the Democrat, leading in that race.
Let's look at Arizona Senate right now, where it is too early to call. Mark Kelly, the incumbent, trying to hold off Blake Masters. In the Nevada Senate race, it is also too early to call. It's a place buffeted by the economic winds. And the Wisconsin Senate race, also too close to call.
Let's stay out west. Utah's Senate race too early to call. Mike Lee, the incumbent, trying to hold on against a bid from an independent, Evan McMullen, who said he would not caucus with either Republicans or Democrats if elected. And here's how the Senate stands at this hour, 46-46. If you like a tight election, this is your night. And let's go to the House model. This is what NBC News is projecting at this hour. 219 seats for Republicans, 216 for Democrats. 218 is what is needed for control. But please look carefully at this. There's a margin of error, plus or minus 13 seats. That means it could go 13 seats higher or lower from the numbers you see right there.
Put another way, we don't know.
We don't know. This is a fancy way of saying this is very close, and Chuck, we may not know tonight.
Look, I have been at NBC starting with the 2008. This is the election. This is the first time we've not been able to call control of the House on election night. And I'm guessing it's probably hasn't happened since maybe when television started at this point. And there's a reason for it. We told you these early indicators. At the end of the day, so far, basically, Republicans have picked up one of their target seats. One. Virginia, 2. They didn't get Spanberger. They don't have Frank Mervan yet. He's leading. You start to look here. North Carolina 13 is a seat that Democrats ended up picking up. That was a new seat there, if you will. Let me get out of this over here. We've got, when you start to look, the top targets that they had, Democrats holding 13. They picked up Ohio 1. That was a pickup for the Democrats. Ohio 13. That's a hold. You look at more of these targets. Ohio 9. This was Marcy Kaptur. She was running against the January 6er. She won. Rhode Island, too, was a favorite race of the House Republicans. They kept talking about, look at the strength of Republicans coming back in New England. Didn't happen here. Democrats are holding Rhode Island, too. So you're just seeing it wherever we look. This is the reason why this House projection is essentially, it's a coin flip. Let's see what happens in California. We got a lot of House races to count. We got 3 Democratic-held seats in Nevada that we may not know for days. We've got about 6 seats that matter in California. So at the end of the day, this is a race-by-race fight for control of the House. Slight advantage Republicans. Slight. But that's it right now.
And abortion has literally been on the ballot in some states. Let's look at where we are with Proposition 3 in Michigan, the right to abortion. Yes, right now with 55%.
3 states had an abortion measure on their ballots. California, one of them. Prop 1, yes, there is a right to abortion. And Vermont, it amends its constitution. Yes, a right to reproductive freedom, reproductive autonomy, as the measure puts it in Vermont. That's a change to the Constitution. Yamiche Alcindor is at Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer's headquarters in Detroit. And Yamiche, we have seen this abortion issue be one that galvanizes Democrats, certainly in those early weeks after the Supreme Court handed out the Dobbs decision striking down Roe v. Wade. Some wondered whether or not the Democrats had emphasized it too much. I guess that's something that they're looking at in Michigan as well.
Certainly, Savannah. And what Democrats are feeling right now as they're waiting for Governor Whitmer, who was hoping to get reelected in this state, they're feeling good about the fact that she really did centralize her closing message on abortion, making the case over and over again across this state that it was critical to vote for Proposal 3, which was that referendum that was on the ballot here in Michigan to enshrine abortion rights into the state constitution. NBC is now projecting that that is going to be approved. We've also seen in California as well as Vermont, which were 2 other states that were looking at enshrining abortion rights into their constitutions. They are projected to do so as well. 2 other states, Kentucky and Montana, are looking at other sort of abortion ballot initiatives. But really, Democrats make the critical decision to say, you know what, while people are focused on inflation, we're also going to talk about abortion. And I asked Governor Whitmer about that yesterday, and she told me that abortion is connected to the economy and inflation. She says one of the biggest decisions that people are going to make about their economy, their budgets, is going to be family planning, when and if they want to have children. So Gretchen Whitmer feels like she's done what she's supposed to do here. Of course, the Republican Tudor Dixon, she was against abortion rights in all cases, including in rape and incest. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the governor's race. Still too close to call, but definitely one to continue to watch.
All right, Yamiche, thanks very much.
They're fired up at Whitmer headquarters anyway.
Our soundproof booth is not working.
So let's turn to Andrea and Hallie on this issue.
So, go ahead, Andrea, please.
Sorry. Well, I was just going to point out that in Wisconsin, abortion is a big issue in the Senate race. 62% of Wisconsin voters told the exit poll that they favor making abortion legal, 35% not. So abortion and crime are sort of splitting the vote there, but abortion is important to more voters, and that could be helping Mandela Barnes keep it at least close against Ron Johnson.
And look at the stakes here, right? Because in Wisconsin and North Carolina, a couple of these states, what happens for these state house races is going to make a big difference, because it is entirely possible that Republicans could end up with, in Wisconsin, a supermajority that is veto-proof, no matter who ends up in that governor's mansion.
Legislature.
Yeah, exactly, in the state house, in the state legislature, in that tight governor's race there, which is going to have an impact on some of these bills to restrict abortion access that Republican lawmakers on the local level, state lawmakers, are putting forward. You look at these props overall, though, here's why this is significant here. There were 3 on the ballot that would expand abortion access in the country. 2 others we're still waiting on that would restrict abortion access in 2 states, Kentucky and Montana. But in these 3 states, you were in Prop 3, that's a big deal, right, for the reasons that Yamiche laid out. But Vermont, too, Savannah, you mentioned it is a constitutional change, a change to Vermont's constitution. This is one of, if not the first times we've seen that happen in this post-Dobbs era, meaning since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. That is laying out the stakes and the scope here.
Well, let's turn to some of our analysts. We've got Robert Gibbs, an NBC News political analyst, former Obama White House press secretary, and Michael Steele, NBC News political analyst, former chair of the Republican National Committee, former governor of Maryland, I might add. Gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Good evening. Actually, it is good morning.
You're right.
Oh, gosh, I knew at one point I'd be right about that again. Yes, exactly. Today's show's in like 4 hours. Let's talk to you, Robert. I mean, look, you know, on the one hand, Democrats have got to be sighing a big breath of relief because the feared red wave is not here. At the same time, they may well lose control of both houses of Congress.
Well, I think the House is really close. I think, and you went through this a little bit ago, I think the path is really getting narrow for Republicans to seize control of the Senate. We may be spending Thanksgiving in or around Atlanta, but I think the path is narrow, and I think the reason tonight is pretty clear. Democrats were energized about the Dobbs decision. They were energized about taking on Donald Trump. They were energized about election denial. They were energized about party extremism. I don't think anybody, Savannah, would have guessed that if we looked at the exit poll, that Democrats would be leading with independent voters 49 to 48. A fairly stunning development after all of this election is played out.
And Michael, let me ask you, where does the finger pointing begin in the Republican Party if this goes on the track that we're currently seeing it?
Look, a lot of the finger pointing is going to be silent finger pointing. You will hear very little, I think, outwardly blaming Donald Trump for his hand in selecting some of these candidates in races that were competitive in a very good environment for Republicans, like Georgia and like Pennsylvania. When you think about the Republican candidate in that primary that had a better shot at really bringing Democrats to the Republican side of the ticket, Trump weighed in with Oz, and the rest, as they say, is the land of crazy. And I think a lot of folks right now are going to be sitting back quietly, stewing in their recriminations, and trying to figure out, quite honestly, how to, if Georgia goes to a runoff, forestall any announcement by Donald Trump next week about a presidential bid with a potential December runoff election in Georgia at stake. So the party is dealing with a lot of bumps that they didn't see. A lot of us did see it. A lot of us called it and talked about how difficult this terrain would be. But here we are, and now you'll be talking about what Republicans are saying quietly and publicly behind Donald Trump's back and hoping that he just quietly goes away. But y'all know that ain't happening.
Well, let's talk about, we have former President Trump and we have former President Obama also very visible on the campaign trail. Robert, I mean, do you feel that Obama had an effect here in some of these races?
I do. I mean, look, I think the combination of both Obama and Biden in Pennsylvania was probably a help. I think, as a surrogate, a surrogate can say and do things that, quite frankly, a candidate can't. A former president can say things about the current president that they may not be able to. And I think what President Obama was able to do, one, is get people pretty fired up, but also just to make some real clear arguments about what was at stake and do it in a way that recalled the excitement and the passion of the Obama-Biden presidency now being carried out by Joe Biden. So I think it built a lot of enthusiasm. I think it got a lot of people excited. And I think it's probably made some difference having all of our surrogates out on the trail in these last few days.
Michael Steele, we know that there are a number of election deniers and doubters who have been on the ballot tonight. Will they accept the results of this election?
Yes and no. It depends on whose race you're talking about. If it's their race, yes, we won this fair and square. If they lost, probably not. Look, we saw earlier this evening, Lester, you had Kari Lake out there in Nevada talking about how many problems there were and intimating that there was something nefarious going on. And when confronted by reporters saying, hey, what does that mean for your race? If you win tonight, are you going to be concerned that you didn't win fairly? And she was like, well, no, that's I'm more concerned and interested in about who's going to be counting the vote and who's going to be touching the ballots. So folks like Carrie Lake and other election deniers, they know what's at stake here. They know the truth of the matter, and yet they persist in these lies, and they get constantly caught in them. So, look, on the back end of this, yes, we should anticipate people making noise and sounds about election integrity and whether or not their election was problematic. But from everything we can see tonight, the way these elections have been played out, it's been fair. It's been above board. It's been transparent. And the voters have spoken in big numbers.
Gentlemen, thank you. Good discussion.
Thank you, and good morning. We're back right after this, after midnight on the East Coast.
Milhares de ofertas com 50% de desconto? É da Shopee! Black Friday antecipada da Shopee. No dia 11/11. Vem pro app!
We're here to start conversations about the big things happening in our world, because it's not my job to tell you what to think. My job is to think about what you tell me.
Now Tonight with Joshua Johnson, streaming weeknights at 8 on NBC News Now.
We're back 12:15 in the morning here on election night, 9:15 on the West Coast. Let's get to some results. Minnesota's governor's race has been decided. Tim Walz, the incumbent, will go on to victory there. In Hawaii, the governor's race, it's too early to call, but the Democrat Josh Green is leading in that race.
Let's check into the Arizona governor's race. Too early to call there. The Wisconsin governor's race also, that one actually too close to call. And Michigan governor's race too early to call.
And let's go to Nevada. The governor race there, very hotly contested. Too early to call there. We'll be waiting a while for results there. So we'll continue the discussion here. The economy being a huge issue. We saw voters say it again and again, Hallie.
Over and over, right? I was out on the trail in Florida, in Georgia. I was on the phone with people all weekend. And again and again. Even, people think of this as a Republican issue, but even Democrats talked about it, right? And I talked with one woman in Arizona who leaned Democratic. But she talked about this. She talked about her concern over Katie Hobbs not debating, for example, which is an issue we'll get to in Arizona. But it matters to people because they feel it. Like, they get it. It's not, we talk about how threats to democracy has also been an issue for people. Unlike any other issue, what you pay for gas matters in your life, right? How you get to work deeply affects like your everyday thinking, and so it's no surprise.
But doesn't it come down to who do you blame? We all can accept nobody wants to pay higher prices, but when it comes to walking in and casting your ballot, it's who you blame.
It's always the president in the White House that gets blamed when the economy goes bad.
Yeah,
that's the terrible reality for this president.
Why the midterms are often difficult when you're talking about this kind of economy. It's a strange economy, though, where you have unemployment very low, inflation generationally high. Tom Yamas has been looking at how the economy question played out for voters in the exit polls. What did you find?
Hey, Savannah, it's past midnight in the exit polls. They are popping. All right, so first off, you guys were talking about the economy here. Look at this number right here. We go from 2014, where people thought the economy was around 75%. They thought the condition of the economy was not so good. It goes down in 2018, but it comes up tonight to 75% that the economy is not good. When we expand this out a little bit, we ask about gas prices. Have gas prices caused you financial hardship? 65% say yes, no 34%. We want to emphasize this because this is what Republicans ran on. And at this hour, of course, things could always change. We're talking about a Republican ripple and not a red wave. I want to break down two other states because we're watching the Senate races in Georgia and Pennsylvania. First up, let's look through this through the prism of the president, President Joe Biden's job approval. This right here is in Georgia. 56 disapprove, and you still have a razor-thin race right there. In Pennsylvania, job approval right here. 10% somewhat disapprove, 44% strongly disapprove. So when you marry those together, you're pretty much at where Georgia was. The president is not really popular there, but this is what's really fascinating, right? We wanted to ask when people made up their minds on these votes. So Georgia voters, when did you decide for whom to vote for? And the question here, do campaigns matter? Well, we can debate this. 76 made up their mind about who to vote for in Georgia before October. Look at this. There's been so many ads run. That's when the women came forward against Herschel Walker as well. And yet 76% of the voting population in Georgia that we polled had already made up their decision. In Pennsylvania, so much has been made about the debate about John Fetterman's health. 71% made their decision before October. That's pretty incredible data. It makes you think where the races have gone and how much money has been spent over the last month. Guys, back to you.
Okay, here's a nerdy number. This for you, Chuck. We actually got it from our pollster. Okay, Consumer Confidence Index, okay? We have had 6 straight months with a Consumer Confidence Index below 60. That is the first time that has happened in 70 years, okay? The only other times cycles this low, not 60, this is a 70-year, was 74, 80, and 2008.
And wave. Not a wave.
I
mean,
know.
that is why so many smart people, that's why our pollsters were leaning more in that direction simply because the fundamentals. But polarization trumps the fundamental. Look at what Tom just showed us. People are already in the trenches. As a colleague of mine just called it, this is World War I for politics. It's trench warfare. All this money to move an inch.
It's the wrong direction that people are feeling. They're feeling an economy that doesn't actually exist because of inflation, because the jobs market is so much better. The jobs numbers are so much better. You've never had consumer confidence this low when you've had a jobs picture this good.
You have been saying this for days, Chuck. You've been writing about it. It's polarization versus fundamentals. What kind of an election is it going to be? We already know it. We know.
I mean,
right?
Republicans could still end up controlling the House and the Senate when all is said and done. And it's pretty clear polarization is the strongest force in American politics tonight.
Okay, we'll keep covering it. We'll be back right after this.
Mr. Secretary, when is this going to get better? You came into this job saying you were going to fight crime. Have you been successful? Found a way to put that. Can you update us on the status of negotiations? All right, welcome back to NBC News coverage of Decision 2022. The midterms providing a lot of drama in ways that maybe a lot of people hadn't expected tonight, but we're taking it through the night. It is a little after, I have no idea what time it is.
What does it matter?
I started that segment, and then it's around 12:20.
Well, where are the votes left to be counted? Chuck Todd is standing over there with that answer.
By the way, it reminds me of something, Lester. This feels like a roller coaster, but remember what happens with a roller coaster? You go back to the same place you started. Yeah. I have a feeling.
I was about to say you get sick?
No, well,
okay.
and that too maybe.
Okay.
But I have a feeling we're going to end up right where we started tonight. Anyway, let me just show you. We've got a great tool here to show you. Obviously, not a lot of vote left, and we can tell you where it is, so you have an idea, and you can see here the remaining vote that is left here. And this is why we think Warnock's going to have a shot at getting this 50% plus one and voting the runoff, because look at, yes, there's drips of vote remaining in a lot of these red counties, but the bulk of it is in the Atlanta suburbs. So, like I said, I expect us to have a recount to see if we have a runoff in Georgia. Let me take you to Pennsylvania. Little less reporting there. We know that Philadelphia may be late, but let me show you the same routine here so you have an idea of where this remaining vote is. And, let me get that out of the way. Unfortunately, my little filter here, remaining vote, won't get out of the way because it's sitting over, but you can see all of the yellow is underneath that. I will let our board folks know we have a minor flaw there. Now let me take you to Wisconsin and give you the same thing here. This one, Johnson leads. Here, the remaining vote. This is why I think I'd rather be Ron Johnson than Mandela Barnes. Yes, there's a bunch of vote out in the southeast part of the state, Milwaukee and Dane County. But look, there's quite a bit of vote in various places in Wisconsin. That's a little bit more, you notice these yellow circles, a little bit bigger in these red counties than they were with Herschel Walker there. And then finally, I'll take you to Arizona. It's still super early, and we know it takes a long time. But just to give you an idea of remaining vote, I mean, the problem with there's always really one big circle when it comes to remaining vote, the biggest county in America.
Sure,
Maricopa
thanks
County.
so much.
All right, we'll keep watching it. NBC's coverage of these historic midterm elections returns right after this.
And good evening, I'm Tom Yamas. Election night has now turned into election morning. We still have continuing coverage of Decision 2022 from our NBC News election headquarters here at 30 Rock in New York. Right now, the Senate is hanging in the balance. Here's what it looks like at this hour. Republicans came into the night needing a net gain of 1 seat to take back control, but they are still waiting for a pivotal flip, and they could be waiting a while. Here's why. The race in Arizona right now, too early to call. In Pennsylvania, the race is also too early to call, but John Fetterman is leading, and that would be a Democratic gain. In Wisconsin, the race also too close to call there as well. The incumbent Senator Ron Johnson, a Republican. We're waiting to see what happens there. And the high-profile Senate race in Georgia between Republican Herschel Walker and incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, who won that special election, still too close to call. We are watching this one so closely. And so is Ellison Barber, who's at Herschel Walker's headquarters in Atlanta. Ellison, we heard from Herschel Walker earlier tonight. What exactly is happening, and what's the mood there just behind you?
Yeah, so we've now heard from both Herschel Walker as well as incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, both of them delivering a message to their supporters saying this is going to be a long night. Both of them saying we feel good. Herschel Walker addressed supporters at his campaign headquarters here around 10:30. He said in part, "We're in a fight, are we not? I'm like Ricky Bobby, I didn't come to lose." About an hour later, Warnock addressed his supporters saying in part, "We always knew that this race would be close. Hang in there. I'm feeling good." We did expect this race to be close in all of the polls leading up to this for a good month plus. These two candidates have essentially been in a dead heat. The magic number tonight, though, it's 50.01%. If neither candidate gets a majority of the vote, this will go to a runoff. Right now, about 15,000 votes are separating these two candidates. This is really coming down to the wire, Tom, and we just heard from Walker's campaign here. They're telling us they do not expect to have any sort of final call tonight. It seems like they too will be up all night waiting to see what happens here. But again, the message from both teams, both candidates, is that they feel confident. Tom?
You know, Ellison, you quote Talladega Nights. That's a pretty bold move. But how does the Walker campaign explain Governor Brian Kemp being on such firm footing and Herschel Walker still in a world of unknown?
Yeah, I asked them a little bit about that, even just looking at some of the numbers in counties that are rural, really red counties that Donald Trump performed very well in. Herschel Walker has been 2 to 3% behind Donald Trump's numbers in some of those counties, and we've seen Warnock perform better than Biden did back in 2020, but they say they're not worried about that, at least from the Walker's campaign's perspective, as they feel confident. They say that they're going to be able to run up the margins just enough in those rural counties to pull off a win here. That's what they want to do, is just pull off a win. They're not necessarily comparing it to how well Governor Kemp did. This race is incredibly close. We have been reporting that split ticket voters could be a factor here. In polls in the last week and a half before Election Day, you had about 10% of Republican-leaning voters saying that they were withholding support from Herschel Walker, either looking to split their ticket in the Senate race after voting for Republican Governor Kemp and voting for Warnock or the Libertarian candidate, or saying they just didn't know what they were going to do. In a race this close, those small margins matter, but we have seen higher numbers for Kemp than we have for Herschel Walker here. Tom?
All right, Ellison, we appreciate it. We want to pause now to rejoin NBC's special coverage of Decision 2022.
Welcome back to Balance of Power, NBC News coverage of the 2022 midterms. We continue to sift our way through the numbers, and we can give you a characterization right now in the Georgia Senate race. It's the same characterization we gave you last time and the time before that. Too close in that race. You can see a 13,000 vote difference between the two men. The Pennsylvania Senate race, too early, but we can tell you that John Fetterman, the Democrat, is leading in Pennsylvania.
Here's Nevada Senate race. Too early to call there. Catherine Cortez Masto trying to hold on to her Senate seat in Arizona. Too early to call. Mark Kelly also trying to hang on there. In Wisconsin, it is too close to call. Ron Johnson looking for a third term. Mandela Barnes, his opponent.
And the Utah Senate race, it is too early to call. Let's show you right now where things stand at this hour. In the Senate, it is 46-46 with 8 undecided seats.
Let's go out west. The Oregon governor's race has been an interesting one. They haven't had a Republican governor in decades, but we've got a three-way race here. Right now, at this hour, Tina Kotek is leading. We will continue to watch that. It's too close to call right now.
Keeping a sharp eye on the Wisconsin governor's race. That is too close to call right now. Tony Evers, the Democratic incumbent, trying to hang on. The Arizona governor's race is too early to call.
Let's go to Jacob Sobroff. He's in Las Vegas at the shared headquarters for Democratic U.S. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, as well as the Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak. How's the feeling there?
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Lester. Yeah, so when I was over at the polling location in Henderson, we saw a lot of people dropping off those mail-in ballots and those drop-box ballots. And it turns out that those folks, nothing wrong with voting that way whatsoever, but it turns out folks that did vote in that way are part of the reason the Democrats on the ground here, including a source close to the Masto campaign, they do not believe that they are going to know for certain the results of the election tonight. I want to re-emphasize how important this race is, ultimately in tipping the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. Adam Laxalt, the former Attorney General here, and Senator Cortez Masto, the historic first Latina senator in the United States Senate, have been going at it over many issues, but most notably the state of the economy here in Nevada. One of the worst unemployment rates, one of the highest inflation rates in the U.S. is right here. As we crisscrossed Las Vegas with that culinary workers union, we kept hearing time and time again, it is the economy. Well, it turns out the people that voted on that issue, the people that voted on other issues, they are not going to get their result tonight necessarily here. It doesn't mean that more votes are not going to trickle in, but the Clark County Registrar in particular here in Las Vegas has essentially too many mail-in ballots and too many drop box ballots to be able to count tonight. So as we talked about earlier, this is not going to be a race that is decided early this evening, guys.
We'll be staying in Vegas, Jacob, I guess, for one more night.
It stays there.
Sure. I should have said it.
That's all right. That's what we're here for.
All right, Jacob, thank you. We want to go to Arizona now. I think we've got Vaughn Hilliard over at Kari Lake's headquarters. Vaughn, are you there? What are you hearing?
Yes, Savannah, I think this is important here when we're talking about what just took place. Kari Lake, the Republican candidate for governor, somebody who is seen as a bright star in this Republican Party, largely because of the belief that she would be able to take the features of Trumpism and extend it in, be able to appeal to a broader swath of the electorate. But what we are seeing right now here, again, there's about anywhere up to 40% of ballots are still outstanding and need to be counted. And the expectation is that those remaining ballots are going to skew Republican. But right now she's down by about 13 percentage points. Kari Lake, though, just came out onto stage. She has been at the forefront of election conspiracies around 2020. And from this stage to a crowd of several hundred here in Scottsdale, she said, I want to read you the quote, "We had a big day today, and don't let those cheaters and crooks make you think anything different." The tenor of Kari Lake was very stern. Frustration, this is not the party they expected to be having tonight. They, advisors who talked to me, expected to essentially run away with this. There's balloons behind us here. They've been waiting to drop them. Blake Masters is running behind her. He's right now down by 17 percentage points to Mark Kelly here. But for Kari Lake, this is a really not the night that they were expecting here. And we should know, she just said on that stage that despite the gap in the percentage here, and again, we are expecting those day-in ballots, which will likely skew Republican, to roll in through the night, yet she said that she believes that she will declare herself the victor here within, quote, hours. There's a long night ahead here in Arizona, and it's very clear that Kari Lake, whether she wins or whether the numbers show that she loses, has every intention to make this a battle here around the idea of fraud. Of course, she has not presented any such evidence of allegation or even allegations of fraud in this gubernatorial race yet. You just heard it from her herself, referred to the cheaters and the crooks here in Arizona on this election day. Savannah?
Vaughn, it certainly gets us thinking about the president made that speech last week about democracy. I think a lot of people kind of raise their eyebrows. Is that what you want to talk about going down the stretch? But you have to wonder if stories like we just heard there, if it's had an effect.
Because it matters, right? And we know that it matters. And you look at, I think it's important here, and I know we'll talk more about Arizona, but to take a step back and to think about how times have changed. Because think about 2 years ago, the governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey, certified a Joe Biden victory in that critical state. You had, at the time, the state speaker of that state house, Rusty Bowers, resisting pressure from the former president, right? He has since come out and testified about that moment in the January 6th Select Committee in this very high-profile way. Now here we are. Governor Ducey, after having opposed Kari Lake, has endorsed her now, right? Rusty Bowers is no longer, in his position there. Things look a lot different 2 years later than they did 2 years ago. Look ahead to 2024 and what we may see. Kari Lake is somebody who has a national profile and clearly wants to have a national profile. Remember, she cut ads for Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, for Tudor Dixon in Michigan, right? Obviously, she doesn't live in Pennsylvania or Michigan, but these are people who share this election denialism attitude that is born out of what we have seen, the seeds planted by former President Trump.
Well, we talked about this a little earlier. I mean, obviously, we've been talking about who controls Congress, a very important issue for good reason.
Yes.
But these state house races and races that, frankly, normally on a night like this, we may not look at secretaries of state or attorneys general. Yeah. But in many of these key states, not just any states, battleground states, the very states that in some cases, like in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, were decided by the narrowest of margins. Depending on what happens tonight, if you have election deniers / doubters taking over these roles, where the governor has to certify elections, or the Secretary of State decides how elections are run, or the Attorney General decides which lawsuits to file and what to challenge in court. You have a very different scenario potentially setting up for 2024.
We want to continue in Arizona if we can. Aaron McLaughlin is at Senator Mark Kelly's headquarters in Tucson. Aaron?
Yeah, that's right, Lester. And his supporters that have gathered at this watch party say they're optimistic. There's a definite sense of excitement in the air here, in part given the results so far showing incumbent Senator Mark Kelly in the lead with 57.6%. That's with 52% of the vote counted. Now, there's also a recognition in this room that the Democrats traditionally, in a race like this, have a strong early showing because the Democrats are more likely to vote by mail. Those ballots are going to be counted first. There is a sense that that lead could narrow as the hours progress, but nevertheless, there is this optimism. I spoke to Senator Kelly earlier today at a canvassing event, and he told me that he was confident about today, that he's spoken to his supporters who've been out canvassing neighborhoods here in Tucson and elsewhere in Arizona, and he said that they had positive things to say. So people here in Tucson, in this room at least, are optimistic, although at the same time recognizing that this could still be a very, very close race and the situation could change in the coming hours.
All right, Aaron McLaughlin in Tucson, Arizona. If you're there for a few days, stop by. My mom will take good care of you. You can stay in my childhood bedroom, no problem at all.
That's an amazing and generous offer, Savannah. You know, we were talking about the Secretary of State races. I was flipping over because I'm tracking where we are with projections on these Secretary of State races. 10 of them, the Republican candidates who are running, are election deniers. And we have projections now. We have results. And in 2 of them, the election denying candidate has won in Alabama and in Wyoming. In 5 others, the election denying candidate has lost. Here's what I want to talk about. 2 states that we're really watching for this, because Savannah, you laid out the stakes. When do we talk about Secretary of State races here on a midterm night? Not often, hardly ever before 2020. Arizona, which we just discussed, that vote is still outstanding, obviously, for the candidate running for Secretary of State there. But look what happened in Michigan. You had Christina Caramo running, considered a MAGA candidate, right? Backing very much the former president's lies about election fraud in 2020. She lost to Jocelyn Benson. And that is, I think, an interesting, I don't know if you can call it a bellwether. I probably wouldn't go that far, but I think it is worth noting as we have the conversation here about the stakes that these battleground states face.
That's the issue. It's the battleground.
Michigan
You mentioned election deniers or doubters winning secretaries of state in Alabama and
Red
Wyoming.
states.
Let's be honest,
Yes.
those are not the states that are going down to the wire on any election night in a presidential election. Yeah. But when you're talking about Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin,
that's right.
Pennsylvania, it matters. In Pennsylvania, the governor appoints the Secretary of State, and now we know it'll be Josh Shapiro, the Democrat.
And I've been getting texts from Democrats in Michigan, and they are really concerned right now about Dan Kildee, a veteran congressman from Flint, Michigan, very highly respected, well-liked, remember the water crisis. And he's the Democratic Party officials there are concerned about him.
But he's in a tough district. He ran in a tough district. He picked a tough district. There's some people upset with some others that could have, didn't have to be in that position.
And Alyssa Slotkin is not safe. She's in a better space, they think, now than she was earlier, but those are all way too early.
Slotkin, one of the 3 Democrats endorsed by Liz Cheney, who has lost her race. Abigail Spanberger also endorsed.
And Cheney endorsed Spanberger. She won. She also endorsed Tim Ryan, Ohio, which his opponent, J.D. Vance, called the kiss of death for him, and Tim Ryan did not win. So it's a big bag for Liz Cheney's endorsements tonight.
And both Slotkin and Spanberger, and Loria, national security, and rising stars in their party.
All right. Well, we will continue our coverage and our discussion. Lots more ahead on an election night where it all still hangs in the balance. But first, these messages.
Hi Bixby, desligar modo sem vento wind-free. Alexa, ajustar a temperatura para 23 graus. Ok, Google, desligar o wind-free.
As we look out over the latest city-turned crime scene, we see the things left behind. Back now with our NBC News exclusive. Still early in the evening in the West, and we continue to watch the numbers coming out of Nevada. So is Tom Yamas, who has been looking at the exit polls from Nevada. What does it tell you?
Hey, Lester, yeah, we have some interesting exit polling information for both Nevada and Arizona. And interestingly enough, the important issues almost exactly mirror each other in both states. So we asked voters in Arizona first, the most important issue for them as they voted in these midterms, 36% said inflation, 32% said abortion, 18% immigration. We switch this up and we go the most important issue now for voters in Nevada, 37% inflation, 27% abortion, 11% immigration, almost mirror copies. We also have some interesting information about the candidates. So let's start in Nevada here, the Senate candidates. Are Cortez Master or Laxalt's views too extreme? Only Laxalt's, 40%, but 39% for Catherine Cortez Masto. Republicans are going to like that number. We asked the same question in the Senate race in Arizona. Are Mark Kelly or Masters' views too extreme? Only Blake Masters, 48%. That's a better number, obviously, for the Democrats there. Blake Masters, the Republican in this race. I don't know how much we can extrapolate from all this information, but I think what is interesting and what we're noticing here, and Chuck has mentioned this as well, when it comes to battleground states, abortion, the issue of abortion is getting closer and closer to the issue of inflation, not nationally, but definitely in those battleground states. Guys, back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you. We want to welcome in Maria Teresa Kumar, who's an NBC News political analyst and CEO of Voto Latino, as well as former Republican Congressman Carlos Corbeil. He is an NBC News political analyst as well. Welcome to both of you. Carlos, let me start with you. Is this the night you expected?
No, it's not the night a lot of Republicans expected, Savannah. Obviously, Florida, a very bright light for Republicans tonight. But other than that, Republicans are outperforming both in Senate races and in House races. And I'm starting to hear, Savannah, from some Republicans who are saying this is not working for us. This, Trump, messaging is really falling flat. So there's a lot of frustration starting to grow among Republicans and concerns about whether they can win enough seats to control the House, and if they do, whether they will have a governable majority.
Maria, what we've seen so far is simply reinforcing the differences, the polarization we already know is happening. How do we break out of it?
Well, I have to say what is really fascinating to me is that this is a very different congressional map than 2020. This is after the census redistricted many of them, controlled by GOP state houses. So to Carla's point, this should be basically a shellacking by the Republicans to the Democrats, and that is not the case. If anything, I would say that we're not as polarized. I think that you're seeing a lot of Republicans and a lot of independents and moderates saying, we just want a governing House. We want to make sure that people are actually working policy. We don't like the polarization, and that's how we get out of it. And I think one of the things that we've been able to demonstrate, and we don't give the president enough credit, but a lot of his major signature pieces of legislation, they've been bipartisan. Now, it hasn't been a gazillion Republicans, but it's been enough for him to say that he is a bipartisan president, and I think we're seeing it tonight.
Carlos, you're obviously someone who knows Florida very, very well. What do you think this night means to Ron DeSantis beyond the obvious, which is that he was reelected quite handily, but he also is the architect of the redistricting in Florida that has been very, very successful for Republicans tonight. How do you think this affects what he decides to do going forward, remembering that, of course, Donald Trump is also saying that he's going to have a big announcement next week about his own ambitions?
Well, Savannah, it looks like this is the best possible scenario for Ron DeSantis and his team. Clearly, he did very well in Florida. It was a landslide by Florida standards. He has basically taken Florida off of the map as a swing state. It is now a red state because of the performance that Ron DeSantis turned in tonight. On top of that, a lot of the Trump-backed candidates are struggling in key Senate seats. So Ron DeSantis is going to be able to say, I was an outlier for Republicans on this important election night, and he's going to point to Donald Trump and say Trumpism is failing the Republican Party. We need to turn the page. I don't think the DeSantis team could have written tonight any better for him.
And Maria, have we really understood at this point the implications of Donald Trump as an effect on the Republican Party?
I think we're going to take a pause because I think Florida is very much a different part of a different state. It's one of the only places where young voters in general as a whole will never eclipse older voters, in the Latino community in particular. But when you see at the end of the day the tea leaves where young voters in particular and Latino voters, when we're looking at Pennsylvania and Georgia, even in Arizona, it's going to tell a different story. And I do think that Liz Cheney going out on the campaign trail, warning Republicans that they have to break the fever, I think we're starting to see it tonight.
All right.
Maria and Carlos, thank you very much.
Appreciate that perspective. We'll continue to cover this election night, election morning here on NBC. We're back after this quick break.
This is your territory.
Hey, I'd love a shot at it.
Sometimes the news can be difficult and overwhelming for kids to understand.
Ukraine and Russia. Could you help me understand what's going on?
So to help make sense of it all, we've created a newscast just for them. We hope your family will watch Nightly News Kids Edition.
Just before 1 o'clock in the morning out east, and we have a big call to make. NBC News projects that John Fetterman will prevail in that hotly contested Pennsylvania Senate race. And that brings us to the Senate at this hour.
And the Senate at this hour, well, I'll show you the numbers there. Senate Democrats leading 47-46, 7 undecided seats. It's turned to Chuck. Where does this take us?
Well, I've kind of already decided one of those two already, just so you know. This is our what-if map. So this is essentially what's left that we haven't called. We're sitting at, in my projection here, 48-48. And if you look, Wisconsin, Johnson is leading. I don't know if there's enough vote for Barnes to catch him. We haven't called it yet. It's getting close. But Republicans are running out of room here, and that Pennsylvania loss means, look at this, Democrats just need 2 of these 3, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada. They're leading in Arizona, and there's a lot of math there that indicates Masters is underperforming Lake, and that's a problem. And we already know this is either runoff or somehow Warnock pulls it off. The big unknown of the night is what's going on in Nevada. Republicans were really bullish about Nevada. Democrats were really nervous about Nevada. But I don't know about you guys. I'm not assuming anything when it comes to Nevada turnout, what we thought it was going to be perhaps 12 hours ago. I'm not as convinced of anymore, so we'll see. But basically, it looks like Republicans are running out of seats in order to find control of the Senate.
By the way, and we should just mention this in Pennsylvania, this is a pickup for Democrats.
This is the first pickup. Yeah. This is the first road win, if you will. I said, is somebody going to win something on somebody else's turf? This is the first major, this is the only Senate pickup we've had so far.
The seat held by a Republican picked up by a Democrat, Andrea, in Pennsylvania.
Well, this is such a big deal because, first of all, this was Pat Toomey's seat, of course, but John Fetterman had so much difficulty because of the health issue. Mehmet Oz, so well funded. I think this is another case where, as Chuck was pointing out earlier, the Trump coming in at the end in that final weekend for Dr. Oz really had to hurt him because Pennsylvanians really reacted against Mastriano, the Trump choice for the governor's race, and they don't like extreme candidates. Pennsylvania has been a tough win in the past. You know, Hillary Clinton lost it. Donald Trump won it. John Fetterman did better than Trump did with the non-college educated voters rather than he did better than Biden did and worse than Trump is the point.
Well, nobody with this low of an approval rating as a sitting president has ever done this well in a midterm in the modern era. And the Republicans have to look in the mirror. And if they don't sit here and look at Trump, and they may be afraid to pick this fight, but there's no doubt, this is now the fact Biden's sitting at 45%. The economy is where it was. You read that stat. This shouldn't be competitive, and it is. And I think you have one place to look.
We should also notice Fetterman, I think a lot of people, when they watched his performance in that debate, were very concerned. Both of you have seen him since. His condition has improved.
The last 10 days, he's really been campaigning aggressively and performing a lot better. And that may have made a difference.
Hold that thought. We're back right after this break.
Good evening, I'm Tom Yamas. We're picking up our special coverage of Decision 2022. Results are coming in from many key races, and we're waiting to see how things are going to play out in one of the most competitive Senate races in the country. The entire power in the Senate could come down to this race right here. Too early to call between incumbent Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto and Republican challenger Adam Laxalt. And the Latino vote there is crucial to these results. I want to turn now to NBC correspondent, my good friend, Guad Venegas, who's at the Republican Watch Party in Las Vegas for us tonight, Clark County there. Guad, talk to us about the Latino vote. You've been on the ground there for months, and how important it is in this race and why it could make the difference.
Tom, well, we've been talking about the Latino vote. The projection was that 1 in 5 voters in the midterm elections were going to be Latino. Now, we do have that NBC News exit poll that found that about 12% of the voters that showed up were Latino. This wouldn't be a new thing, that we project more Latinos to vote than the ones that actually come out. We know from past elections that it's very difficult to understand what motivates Latinos to come out and vote. With that said, even if it's a 12% of Latino voters, that could be enough to break a tie because things are so close here in Nevada. Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democrat Latina incumbent senator, has been counting on that Latino vote. She had the Culinary Workers Union reaching out. They knocked on about 1 million doors. They were projecting to knock on 1 million doors to talk to voters, and that is the best way to reach out to those Latino voters in the state of Nevada, Tom.
Yeah, you know, when we did the poll, the NBC News Telemundo poll, the economy was the top issue for Latino voters. And we know there in Nevada, gas prices very high. Cost of living inflation very, very high. I do want to ask you sort of a random question, but it's important. What was the weather like in Las Vegas and in Clark County? Because there was a lot of severe weather moving into Nevada, and people were wondering how it could affect the vote today.
Tom, no one thought that the weather would be a factor, but it was. We had a storm come into Nevada. It brought snow to Washoe, and it brought rain to Clark County. These are the 2 largest counties. So people had to line up in snow and walk through the rain and the wind in different parts of the state. So we don't know how that affected until we get the total numbers, but definitely it could have been a factor for someone who waited to the last day to come out and vote. Now, the one thing that I would like to tell you, as we get some of the first results coming in from the state of Nevada, Clark County, where the vast majority of voters are located here in Nevada, we've spoken to officials at the county who told us it's going to be days for them to count all of the votes. It's going to be those mailed-in votes and those dropped off at those drop boxes that will be counted in the end. They're going to focus on counting the early votes and those that voted today, and then only after they will begin counting these mailed-in votes, and we know how those can make a difference. So people will have to be patient in Nevada. And if you think of the last election, the presidential election here 2 years ago, Nevada, Tom, was one of those states where we had to wait for days. Every morning we'd wake up, we'd be outside the county office waiting for results. It's a slow process, especially with these mailed-in votes. And keep in mind, today we saw Republicans come out in larger numbers in-person voting in both of the 2 largest counties. But when we look at the number of Democrats versus Republicans that have been voting in through mail in the first 2 weeks, the Democrats, we had the results when early voting ended. It was like something like 150,000. And the Republicans, we saw like 90,000. So we expect the Democrats to have larger numbers in those mailed-in votes, Tom.
All right, Guad Venegas for us from Las Vegas. We want to rejoin NBC's special coverage of Decision 2022, The Balance of Power.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Good morning. It's 1 a.m. on the East Coast, 11 p.m. on the West. This is our coverage of the 2022 midterm election.
It has been an unexpectedly good night for the Democrats against the odds. Let's get straight to some of the results now.
All right. Well, we have just made this call. John Fetterman will win the Pennsylvania Senate race, beating Mehmet Oz in a race that many people thought would not be counted for quite a long time. So Fetterman overperforming what many polls expected. Let's go to Alaska. That Senate race too early to call. Lisa Murkowski trying to hang on to her Senate seat. And in Georgia, it is still too close to call. And the question now is, will there be a runoff election if nobody gets to 50%?
Let's look at the Wisconsin Senate race right now. Too close to call, but Ron Johnson, the Republican incumbent, out in front there. In Arizona, the Senate race, too early to call. Also, the Utah Senate race, too early right now.
They're still counting ballots in Nevada as well. That Senate race, Catherine Cortez Masto trying to hang on to her Senate seat. Too early to call there. She's up against Adam Laxalt. And here's where the Senate stands at this hour. 47 seats to the Democrats, 46 to the Republicans. And the Democrats with that Pennsylvania race have a pickup. Let's go over to the governor's races here. Alaska governor, too early to call there.
Wisconsin, the governor's race, too early to call. We've looking at the Michigan governor's race, that's too early to call as well. Kansas governor, too close to call.
And Michigan governor, also too early to call. We did Kansas. Let's get to Arizona. Too early to call. We saw Carrie Lake already addressing supporters there, indicating she's in it for a fight. And in Oregon, the governor's race is too close to call. We will see what happens there. In Nevada, as with the Senate race, too early to call that Senate race. So I want to get to Dasha Burns. She's at Fetterman headquarters in Pittsburgh. Dasha, there got to be a good mood going on there after this race was called for John Fetterman.
Yeah, Savannah, the energy very quickly changed from very sleepy in this room to absolutely electric. My goodness, we were not expecting to call this race tonight. We were thinking we were going to be waiting potentially days for this, but Fetterman really outperformed in these key areas, outperforming Biden. Oz underperforming Trump in the western part of Pennsylvania that's more red. And behind me, these folks have been chanting, every county, every vote. That has been the Fetterman strategy from the very beginning. We were talking to the campaign earlier as they were feeling optimistic and they were feeling validated and vindicated in their strategy. Fetterman has been going after some of those voters that Democrats had counted out for the last several years. He's been going after the union vote, going after rural voters, going after those places that have felt abandoned by the Democratic Party as part of his brand that he's really leaned into from the outset. This guy who's an outsider, he's been talking about how he's not a typical politician, and that is a refrain that I've heard from a lot of Fetterman voters, Fetterman fans that have voted for Trump in the past, have said the same things about Donald Trump as they say about Fetterman, that he's just not your typical mold, and that's what attracted so many people to him, and that's why you see him performing pretty well in some of these rural red counties and some of these Rust Belt areas that you don't typically see Democrats do very well in. You don't typically see Democrats visit, but he did. This was, of course, a tumultuous campaign following the stroke. A lot of questions, a lot of concern about whether or not he could pull this off. Oz was also making a play for the suburbs, focusing on issues of crime. But in the end, Oz had that rally with former President Trump and with Doug Mastriano, whom Republicans here in the state had told us was too extreme. And there was worry within the Republican Party as Oz was trying to paint himself as a moderate that that rally was going to be a problem. Hard to say what pushed things over the edge in the end, but I can tell you this room is fired up. The podium is out here behind me. We should be likely hearing from Fetterman at any moment here. So much energy, so much Monday morning quarterback for the Republicans here. We were not expecting this night this early, but here we are. John Fetterman will be most likely, as we projected, the next U.S. Senator, the best chance for Democrats to pick up a seat in this midterm election, and they did it. Savannah?
All right, Dasha Burns, thank you very much.
Let's go over to Chuck. You want to talk about that Wisconsin Senate?
Well, it was the other Republican-held seat that Democrats were targeting. You know, they figured if they could pick off one of the two, it would complicate the Senate's math here. We haven't yet called this, but there's a reason why Ron Johnson feels as if he's going to pull this off. Let me show you something, a little bit of a pattern I've noticed here. The good news for Mandela Barnes is he seemed to outperform Biden in the blue areas. You could see there, just barely eking out over Biden in Milwaukee. And he overperformed Biden in Dane County, home of Madison, the University of Wisconsin. The progressive Democrat, that's good news for him. But look at the surrounding counties, the WOW counties, as they like to be called around Milwaukee. And you'll just see here, watch Mandela's Barnes's number and look at the Biden number. He's consistently about 2 points below Biden in all of these suburban counties. And this is where, this is how Biden narrowly won Wisconsin, is he ate into Trump in some of those Milwaukee suburbs. Ron Johnson overperformed Trump in those Milwaukee suburbs. Barnes underperformed Biden. And while he just shows you can't just do it with Madison, Milwaukee alone, Barnes underperforming in the suburbs where crime was a huge, huge issue that Johnson kept hammering him on, having to do, of course, with him being associated with the progressive wing of the party and the whole defund the police movement.
Well, while we're talking about Wisconsin, so you see Ron Johnson looks good for him there in the Senate race. How about the governor's race?
Well, this is what's interesting. So, yeah, exactly. This is a split ticket situation here. So just keep track of that Barnes number. You keep it up here, and you see Evers, and Evers is overperforming Barnes, but Michaels really is underperforming Johnson. He's sitting at 1.2. Let me just go back there. You can see here, there's about a 60,000. Let me see if I got my numbers right there. Yeah, about a 60,000 vote deficit for Michael. So it's not this is Wisconsin, the most polarized state in the union, acting like the most polarized state in the union. The split ticket people are less than a percentage point, but they're going to be the difference between Democrats winning one race, it looks like, and Republicans winning the other.
All right, the big headline, the Democratic pickup in Pennsylvania. Let's go to Kristen Welker, NBC's chief White House correspondent. The president's been making a lot of calls. Is this one he has made yet?
He has not yet called John Fetterman, and in fact, just before we got this news, I was told that there would not be any more calls, and now they may be revising that. Lester and Savannah, no surprise. But look, I asked what the mood was just moments before this call and how the president's feeling, and a top advisor to the president said he is feeling upbeat, that while not all of the results are in, certainly the results so far seem to be better than what they were anticipating. Now that we have this Fetterman news, let me give you some of the reaction from some of the folks who are close to President Biden. One advisor saying it means that candidates matter. It means that candidates who ran with the president did well. So expect to hear that narrative coming from Biden world tomorrow. Another advisor saying, wow, could not be more happy. The state where Biden and Obama campaigned together won the critical Senate race and governor's race. So that's part of the narrative that I think you will hear from the president, from his allies, that running with the president on his policies, on the various things that got passed under the administration, that was the key to winning some of these very close races. Very different story, for example, in Ohio, where J.D. Vance pulled out a victory over Tim Ryan. And so that's the type of contrast that I think you'll see in that Monday morning quarterbacking that you heard Dasha talking about. Now, again, I anticipate that we will hear from President Biden in some fashion tomorrow. And again, his advisors very careful to say clearly not all of the results are in, but they were fearing that red wave that everyone had been talking about, and now they feel heartened by the fact that so far that does not seem to be materializing. And undoubtedly, the fact that John Fetterman is being called the winner of this race is a significant development. And this does cap a night where President Biden has spent the past several hours reaching out to the Democratic winners. Savannah and Lester.
Kristen, thanks very much. Let me bring Hallie back to the conversation.
I mean, I love this nugget that President Biden has put the phone away for the night. If there's somebody you want to pull the phone back out for tonight, it's a projection for John Fetterman as the winner in this Pennsylvania Senate race. Just was in touch with a Pennsylvania Dem member who says a lot of folks are happily surprised. No surprise there. And look at what sort of drove this. We're seeing it in some of the exit polling coming out that we can pull up here, that people just didn't buy. Pennsylvanians just didn't buy that Oz was a Pennsylvanian. Okay, this was a major attack line from the Fetterman campaign. Remember, Mehmet Oz had moved to Pennsylvania in 2020 after living in New Jersey for decades. And boy, did we hear about it in memes from the Fetterman campaign, in plane banners flying over the shore that got a lot of sort of earned media from that campaign as well. They had a pretty effective, the Fetterman campaign, social media game, right? We've been talking about it on set. I'm not saying that's the reason why he won, but I am saying that clearly was a factor as far as making the messaging stick on Oz being
the exit polls suggested that, I mean, what was it? Nearly half of voters didn't think that Oz was Pennsylvanian enough to represent Pennsylvania in the Senate. So, I mean, it just kind of makes you laugh because the whole politics is local and the carpetbagger thing. It still matters to people. That still matters. You got to be from our state, our town. You got to understand where we're coming from.
And think about how much money went into this race, right? Yeah. This is one of the two biggest money races in the country, along with Georgia. This is a big deal.
One of the reasons for the social media campaign, of course, was for months he was off the trail. You know, he had the stroke on the Friday before the Tuesday of the election. He didn't announce it until Sunday, and then he was much more seriously ill than originally acknowledged, and he was off the trail, and you have to show up also. So the fact that he overcame that deficit is extraordinary.
And that exit poll shows it was very much an issue and on voters' minds.
And Oz had to find his voice into how to characterize it, whether it was a point of attack or a point of sympathy or what.
And he actually initially was mocking him, and for a doctor that created a counter reaction from Fetterman to that here you are, a doctor mocking someone who's had a stroke and who is trying to overcome that. And so I think he got some points, Fetterman, for the guts of going out. I mean, I know the debate was a disaster by, everyone's account. But the fact is there was a lot of early voting before the debate, and that he got a lot of points.
Well, look, I mean, in Arizona, the governor candidate didn't even debate, the Democrat didn't even debate Carrie Lake, and that is a decision that a lot of people are questioning.
One quick point about it is that there is a Senate dress code on the floor. And now, I don't know if he's going to wear a hoodie.
Carhartt hoodie allowed.
By the way, our researchers say he is not the tallest senator of all time because Luther Strange apparently was 6'9".
Okay.
The Alabama senator. Fetterman at 6'8". So, we
Right.
got everything covered tonight.
Let's go to a couple of gentlemen who are tall in stature, metaphorically. Rich Lowry, the editor of the National Review, and David Plouffe, who was former President Obama's campaign manager. Hi, guys. So, Rich, let's talk about it. What do you think is the lesson learned for Republicans? I mean, first of all, again, to be clear, still a chance that the Republicans take the Senate. Better than even chance they take the House. So it's just not the red wave, as Lindsey Graham said. It's not the red wave we had hoped for. What do you think the takeaways are here?
Well, Democrats showed up. That's a big takeaway. And this suite of issues that they were talking about that I always was pretty dismissive of because I didn't think they were as important as the economy and inflation. Abortion, democracy, Trump clearly motivated their voters. And you had, a red wave in Florida. You had a red wave in, at least in the gubernatorial race in Georgia, J.D. Vance in Ohio. But otherwise, races that looked like they're going to be close according to some polling. Zeldin, in New York governor, not close at all. The New Hampshire, which looked like it was closing at the end, and Bullock had the momentum, not close at all. So either the Republican momentum was exaggerated at the end, or there was something in the last several days that kind of shifted this and brought it back to Democrats. So it's not a terrible night if you win the House. There's still a chance to win the Senate, but we're talking thread in the needle at this point.
Yeah, David, let me ask you this. If for both sides, was there a point where they miscalculated or assumptions that were simply flawed about the dynamics going into this night?
Well, Lester, I think you spent post-Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court, Democrats looked in polling, they had 2 or 3 months where they looked like they were going to really dominate. Republicans came home in October, and I think probably that dynamic was overcranked by political observers. And I think where we ended is probably where we should have thought all along, which is we're going to have a bunch of close races. I agree with Rich. Democrats turned out. And if the exit polls are right, they also won independent voters narrowly. But Democrats have to win the middle to win swing districts and states, and it looks like that's what they did today. And I think democracy, abortion, I think Trump presided in the White House over a bad 2018 election, and I think he was the main culprit here. A lot of his candidates he endorsed turned out being bad Senate candidates, and I don't think it was super helpful